The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound, and we have some marvelous listener emails and questions. Thank you so much to our listeners. Fantastic questions. We have one from Brandon, who lives in Brownsville, Texas. And Brandon asks, what does electability really mean? And who gets to define it? Fantastic question. Is electability a coded term that reinforces systemic bias? How do race, gender, and class shape perceptions of political viability? Should voters challenge the narrative of electability more aggressively? Excellent questions, Brandon. And I think part of that also has to do with the huge amount of money and funds that big donors can funnel into our voting system, because they get to decide what electability looks like.
Yeah. So here I think I'm going to rip into the Democratic Party a little bit, because electability needs to be determined by the voters. And the Democratic Party has done a really crappy job of letting the voters choose who the candidates are. Whether it's Donna Brazile deciding that Hillary Clinton needs to be the next president, or whoever decided that. And I don't think it was a concerted effort. I think it was just unfortunate timing that led Kamala Harris to basically succeed Joe Biden when Joe Biden dropped out, rather than having some kind of mini primary or something along those lines. But, I only became a Democrat because in Connecticut, we don't get to vote in primaries unless you're a member of a party. And I was an independent before that, but I have a long history with Hillary Clinton, and I wanted to vote for Barack Obama. And so I joined the Democratic Party to vote for Barack Obama in 2006 or 7, whatever year that was. But the people need to decide who's electable and who isn't. And I think that we've suffered tremendously from not understanding, at least on the Democratic side, who the electable candidates are and who they are not. And on the other side, I think they found themselves enthralled to somebody who really shouldn't be electable, but apparently is.
And I would agree with that. Electability is one of those, buzzwords, I would call it. And it's one of those buzzwords that comes from the establishment of the party. And I agree with Scott, electability should really be determined by the voters. And that's it. They should never use the word electability as it comes from a major party. Are they electable? Everybody's electable. Anybody can be elected. It's all there is to it. But
Mark down for president.
But no, stop. But I mean, that goes to the next question: is electability a coded term that reinforces bias? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Remember, we've said this numerous times. We want to be told what to think. We don't want to have to use critical and analytical thinking. There's been a lot of people that have run in primaries that I thought would be excellent presidents, or people to serve in the Senate or people to serve in the Congress. I thought they were excellent. They never stood a chance because the party said they weren't electable. And even when you talk about primaries, the party pushes. I really do think, I don't think Bernie Sanders would have made a great president. First of all, I don't. He's very good at, yelling at the wind and calling out the issues that are the social issues that exist. I think he's brilliant at it, and I think he's spot on. Do I think he could run a country? I'm not so sure. But it was the Democratic Party that decided that Bernie Sanders was not electable. And that created a bias. That created a huge bias. And remember, just because you're running for a primary doesn't mean you all get the same money from the party. It's not like even Steven out there. They're good, certain donors, the big donors are going to support the people that they want. And money is making the determination about electability in many cases, not all cases. If we remember the vote that happened, what was it, Minnesota, where Elon Musk put a carload of money into somebody and they weren't elected. So it doesn't always work, but it generally works pretty often. And again, when you ask about race, gender, and class-shaped perceptions of political viability, I think we vote for people who we think are just like us. So race, gender, and class shape those perceptions? Yeah, to a point. But I truly believe that we vote for people that we think like we do, or say the things that we want to hear. And one of the things that the electorate in this country has forgotten, you have the power to elect somebody out. If you've got somebody that comes in there and says everything you want to hear when they're running for office and then does none of it, it is your responsibility to either stop whining about it and elect them out, or shut up about it and let them continue on, being your representative and not representing what you want them to do for you. And that's bottom line. You, again, getting the government that you deserve.
And part of the electability argument, of course, is that there are very different groups of people who seem to vote in some kind of block. And in the last election, I think there was a huge divide between young women and young men, where young men, my son included, voted for Trump because he perceives Trump as a strong guy and wanted a strong guy to run, and didn't care for the way Kamala Harris carried herself. I think if Kamala Harris had probably presented herself as a skinny, good-looking chick with a great rack, he might have voted for her, but and a lot of guys might have, but that's not how she presented herself. And there seems to be sort of a pop psychology when it comes to Trump, which flies in the face of reality, because no real man spends as much time as he does on hair and makeup. And I think that's very evident from the way he carries himself. He's not a good decision maker. He's not a good deal maker. He's not a good, he's not strong in any sense of the word that we think of it, but he's managed to fool enough people into thinking that he is. And the other part of this is perceptions are hard to change. I was talking to my son was at the same beach as I was, at a different part of the beach, and he was there with a friend of his who's an undocumented illegal alien. And I said, how is Yvonne doing? Is he worried about getting deported? And he said if he gets deported, he's going to go back to Tijuana, where he's from, and he'll live a great life in Tijuana. He's got plenty of money after living in America for 20 years. He's managed to save enough money so he can live like a king down there, and he'd be fine with it. If his run ends, his run ends. I said, well, how do you feel about it? He's one of your best friends. And he said, oh, why would they go after him? He's got a job and he's working really well, and he's been here for a long time, and he's a good guy. They're going after the criminals and the drug dealers and the smugglers. And I said, no, Adam, they're not. They're going, Tom Homan has said those guys are too hard to catch. They're too dangerous to catch. They're going after the people who are working in the fields, and the bus boys and the hotel workers, and people who are in hospitals doing their jobs. Those are the people they're going after because they're easier to catch. And I said, well, how would you feel if Yvonne ended up not going back to Tijuana, but was sent to South Sudan instead, or El Salvador instead, and was put in a concentration camp there? And he said, well, I don't think that's going to happen. And, the way I look at it is like, why take a chance? Just don't vote for somebody who's going to do something like that. But he doesn't seem to understand that logic. But Hispanic men really seemed, as a block, to not want to vote for a woman. There's something about like machismo or something like that made it hard for them to vote for women. And so Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris were unelectable in the eyes of Hispanic men, which is now a significant voting block. And, it's a great part of the game to play. Who's going to be the next president, and who's electable? And, But if we even get that chance again, which we might not, I certainly wouldn't take it for granted that we will. Hopefully they make the right decision, and hopefully the Democratic Party learns that they can't force candidates on us. They've got to let the people decide and the voters decide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as to the last part of the question, should voters challenge the narrative of electability? Yes, absolutely. We talk about our freedoms. We talk about, our rights, all of which come with responsibility. And one of them is to basically be engaged and don't be sheep. We have become, a country of sheep that, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party tells us who's electable. And that's what we're stuck with. I've always been against the two-party system simply because two parties cannot represent all the interests of all the people in the United States. It's not possible. So it's mathematically not possible. I've always been more, and again, a parliamentarian. Where you have 5 or 6 parties, even the silly hat party, for all I care, that they have in England, which is a great party, or the loony party. Fine. They still get votes. They still get votes. Yes, they're probably protest votes, but they still get votes. But when you've got, 4 or 5 viable parties presenting different platforms, there's a far better chance that everyone somewhere to go. You can't tell me that if you took the Republican Party and took the Trump Party and then had one that looked a little bit more like the Reagan Party and one that looked a little bit more like Eisenhower Party, you wouldn't have 3 different voting blocks there. Because all 3 of those presidents, all of them were Republican, but they were different kinds of Republicans. You would have, and I don't think the Trumpettes would be the majority. I think you'd find many of them would be the Reaganettes. Now, the Eisenhower, that would be the definitely older generation that can remember that. But if they did a little bit of studying about what Eisenhower stood for, they might say, hey, no, he's conservative. There was no doubt about that. But he was a different kind of conservative than Reagan was. He was definitely, both Reagan and Eisenhower were a different kind of conservative than the Trumpy Trump. So, that would be the Democrats same way. You would have the Bernie Sanders wing, the very progressive, or the OAC wing, which is, I think, even more progressive than Bernie. I think Bernie is more socialist and OAC is more progressive. So you'd have them. You'd have the old style, like Obama, who wasn't truly a progressive in my mind. He was your basic standard run-of-the-mill Democrat. He believed in social programs. He was socially liberal. But he was policy-wise, he was more moderate. And if we had that parliamentarian system where all these people had to vie for it, and then they had to create a coalition. When we were talking about the bipartisan in the last episode, you have to have bipartisanship in a parliamentarian system. That is the one mistake I think that the founding fathers missed. Maybe it's because back when the founding fathers created the nation, there were 4 parties. You had the Whigs, you had the Republican Democrats. There were all sorts of different parties that made up different factions. And we've moved ourselves into a 2-party system, and that's the thing that hurts us the most. You got A and B. I've always said when I found out that it was going to be Clinton against Trump, my first comment was, these are the best 2 schmokies we can come up with. My God. 330 million people, and these are the best 2 idiots we could come up with? So either we need a better political class or we need to change. Get out of this 2-party system, which I think absolutely crushes us because it does not allow choice. When we always say, well, I want to have choice, my body, my choice, this, that, my choice, my choice, my choice, your political system does not give you choice. You are not afforded choice in the political system that we have today.
Yeah, George Carlin said, 40 different kinds of mustard, but only 2 political parties.
That's exactly right. So hopefully we answered that one, Brooke.
How on earth are we, the people, supposed to take back power enough to change anything and to create a better system or more electable candidates when money seems to drive everything.
So I liked Kamala Harris. I thought she did a pretty good job. I guess in retrospect, I will say that she was too guarded. She wasn't open enough. She didn't go on enough shows. She didn't say enough. So she kept getting asked the same stupid questions over and over again, which must be annoying to deal with. But it's just part of what you have to deal with when you're dealing with the press. Every reporter wants to ask the question that they have to ask, and they all seem to have the same question. So you have to just answer that question so many times. But in general, I think we would have been better off if there had been some kind of open primary there. Obviously, I mean, Mark and I talked about this for 2 years, that Biden should have stepped down long before he did. That once he decided to step down, he should have just made her president and stepped down altogether, and she could run as an incumbent, and you can get to see her in action and get to judge whether she knows what she's doing or not, even if it's only for 5 months or something like that. But they didn't do any of these things. None of these things happened. So you can ask yourself, if they had had an open primary, would Kamala Harris have won it? And my honest answer to that is probably not. There were other probably more electable candidates than her that would have had a fair shot at getting it, that for the sake of unity or party or whatever it was, putting the country before party, whatever it was, they decided not to do. And we would have been better off, and hopefully they don't make that mistake again.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, if we've all said here for the past few years, we thought Biden was a very good president. We think it was a tough position to be put in coming in after Trump, and that was never going to be an easy job. And if history looks badly back on Biden, it will be because of the reasons Scott just outlined. He should have just basically turned over the presidency to Kamala Harris and then let her stand on her own 2 feet, let her get her feet wet, let the country see what she can do or can't do, and then move on from there. But I think that, again, I think history will, if there's a dig that Biden gets from history, it'll be that assessment that he probably should have stepped down. And because let's face it, his mission in 2020 was to beat Trump. He did that. Mission accomplished. Move on. He could very easily, he could have still been a player without being, after that, a player without being a president, because I think he would have been a good advisor. It's sort of like, the Pope Emeritus, where the Pope goes and talks to the Pope Emeritus about stuff. I think that would have been a great role for Biden. I think it would have been a role that he would have really relished. And I think he could have accomplished a lot without being exposed for his age and some of the decline he was in. And I think that it would have given Kamala Harris a real opportunity. So, on January 21st, when he got inaugurated, I would say give him his first 100 days. And he probably should have called Kamala in and said, you know what? I'm done. I've served my country. I've done my bit. The only thing I ask is, hey, can you still keep me in the loop? And I'm sure that Harris and her people would have done so.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So There we have it. We're going to move on to the next.
Electability. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you, Brandon. We appreciate your question. Excellent question. Thank you, and thank you to all our listeners. We appreciate your time and spending some time with us. If you are not yet subscribed on the platform of your choice, please do so. Subscribing is free. We do not have any paywalls. And for your questions, please do keep them coming. And we'll see you all again next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening!